Hi everyone. Today I'm speaking to Tristan Henry Wilson. Tristan and I had a great conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I wish we'd recorded it. So I asked him if he'd want to try again and record it for the channel. So, hi Tristan, thanks for speaking with me today.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
It's an honor and a privilege.
Do you think you could tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am an illustrator, animator, motion designer. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Perfect fit.
And then the rest are a bunch of details.
Yeah. So, what are you doing now?
So I have I guess a good old-fashioned day job, and that is in animation, motion design for a fintech company. And then on, I guess, the side at home, well, I work from home, so everything is from home. But when the office hours end, that's when I get to put on my Illustrator hat. I studied illustration a long time ago, but I studied illustration to become an animator. Okay. And then I finally fulfilled the dream of becoming an animator. But now I also want to do illustration. So I get to kind of pretend to start over from the beginning, even though I know a bunch. And that's actually how I found you, James. One day I was like, oh, I'm going to pretend that I know absolutely nothing about illustration, even though I know something.
Like a fresh
And
start.
I just, and I went on YouTube and did a search for how to become an illustrator. And I found this channel from this person who was giving tiny little master classes of oh yeah, I should do that. Or, oh yeah, I forgot that I should be doing that. Or, oh yeah, I can do this. And now we're here.
Yeah. Right. And I first became aware of you only fairly recently because you'd put out some tips videos on your Instagram, which I would say are probably a bit more inspirational than mine. So, but I feel like it's good to share what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super important. I mean, it's a Library of Alexandria, I guess. You gotta it's one of the gifts that we have as human beings, passing information onto other human beings. It's the only way that we learn outside of just grueling experience. I think the thing that I've learned the most recently throughout this entire process of sharing things online is there's a vast ocean of people that aren't where you are on your journey yet. So I could easily put on my imposter syndrome hat and be like, oh, I haven't ticked all the boxes that I feel like I need to tick in order to tell anyone anything about illustration with anything that resembles proper authority. But it doesn't matter. There are plenty of people out there that may not even be interested in reaching your level. They just want to know okay, what's the difference between a kneaded eraser and this weird white chunky eraser? What are the numbers on the side of these pencils mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
It costs you nothing to share that information, and makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, when I cast my mind back to when I first graduated in my illustration degree, from where I was then to where I am now, I mean, I knew absolutely nothing. Nothing. No, I was, but I didn't realize it at the time. And 10 years from now, I'll feel the same about how I am now, no doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a journey and a process, and I didn't intend to share inspirational stuff on Instagram. I wasn't oh, I'm going to be some kind of art guru. I treat my Instagram posts like journal entries. They're just more for myself than anyone else. And I enjoy the process. It's just kind of like this fun thing to take something that's in your head and craft it in a way that feels complete. And it's an opportunity to also share my art. Like all the B-roll that I use is my own art, and it reaches a large volume, fortunately. And you just kind of find your little space. Saying the things that I felt were important to me ended up resonating with a bunch of people.
Yeah, good. And, you know, sometimes you mentioned imposter syndrome earlier, and I feel that. I feel that all the time about all kinds of things, but putting these kinds of videos out, sometimes I think to myself, why am I doing it? But then I do get great feedback. I often worry about what people who do a similar job to me think of what I'm putting out there. But then I think, well, these videos aren't for those people. They're for new artists who want to learn the basics. You know, so whether those experienced industry professionals like them or not is kind of irrelevant, you know.
Yeah, and I find that it's like that internal dialogue, that internal narrative is like almost. I'm willing to bet for you, but it specifically for me is just categorically false. Anytime I've talked to anybody like in person or bumped into them outside of like the little sphere of Instagram or whatever, and they'll tell you like, oh man, I really like what you're doing. I like the things that you're putting out there. Like it's making a difference. So if you are getting anything that resembles like positive feedback, like you're heading in the right direction. Like unless you're getting like legit ire, like writ large, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah. There's only one,
and everyone's person.
Sorry.
No.
There's only one bit of feedback that sticks in my mind. There's loads of good feedback, don't get me wrong, but there was one I got a little while ago about my Skillshare course, which more or less said that my presentation style was kind of boring. And you know what? I agree. I absolutely agree, because it's just me sat talking to a camera, and I'm not an illustrator, so I can't really add too much more into it. But all I've got to share is what's in my head, you know.
Absolutely, and I would not concern myself with being boring. I think you can be boring, because boring I think is relative, but you can't waste anyone's time. And if the information that you're delivering is interesting, it doesn't matter how boring you are. Like if people are that concerned, they'll listen to you at 2x speed. You know? But like I think as long as you're delivering the goods, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So you're quite experienced in the industry as an animator, but do you ever feel imposter syndrome around your creative work? I mean, whether it's illustration, which is kind of a new venture that you're getting into, or in your animation work.
I don't feel imposter syndrome. I feel like not ready yet. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of I'm standing at the edge of the diving board and I know I just need to jump off. But it's not exactly imposter syndrome. Like I think imposter syndrome is, oh, I have no business being here. You know, like, oh, these people are going to figure out that I'm a fraud. And I don't think I'm a fraud. I just want to perform well. I just want to do a good job. And the fears that I have is that I won't be able to live up to an art director's expectations or something like that. Or that's pretty much it. Disappointing my boss.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think I think a lot of people watching this will resonate with that. There'll be a lot of newer artists that are either thinking about putting their work out there into the world, or just sort of taking their first steps doing that. And I remember that feeling too, of just thinking, well, the work's not ready yet. It's not good enough yet.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Mm-hmm.
the only way it gets good enough is by putting it out there and getting the feedback, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking that plunge, making that leap, like whatever projectile metaphor you want to use,
Yeah.
like it's really what you got to do. But I think this kind of goes back to the kind of like the kind of reels that I make, or short form videos, or whatever we're going to call them right now. Those feelings are real, and they're not like you just being in your head or being neurotic. I think it's totally normal. And like artists of every experience level that I've talked to feel it in some sort of degree. The hardwiring, the hardware of the human mind is a little flawed. We just have to deal with some of these things.
Yeah.
But you're not alone. And I think even just discussing it, even just saying out loud, like, oh, I am not the only person that has to feel this way. It makes it so much easier to be like, oh, okay, I can make this step, I can send that email, give it a shot.
It's talked a lot about in the creative industry, but you can. I'm sure it's prevalent in lots of other jobs too. If you become the CEO of a big company, and you're stepping into a big role with a lot of focus on you, and you just think, well, I've got a lot of experience, but do I really know how to do this new job? There's got to be a lot of doubt there for everybody.
Yeah.
I was listening to maybe Cal Newport,
Mm-hmm.
a little while ago. The
Deep Work.
Deep Work, yeah. I like his podcast a lot. And he was saying that the way to, well, whether or not you can actually conquer imposter syndrome, I don't know. But the way you can kind of fight back against it is to make sure that all the bits that you can control, you've done to the best of your ability, and just accept that the rest is out of your control. When you're sending out work to art directors, if you've written a good email to the best of your ability and you've put your best work out there and you send it out, you've done your bit.
Yeah, ticking those boxes makes a big difference. And then just, you control control the controllables, but also this is something that I fell victim of too, is just like almost being a perfectionist about it. Like, oh, like if I just need to continue to do this, and then once, like, I'll have this magic feeling of being ready. Like I'll just have like this perfect portfolio, and not even perfect, but just like this stunning portfolio that like just has to get work. And then, but even when you get to that level, because I've done it. I've done all the things that I try to tell people to do, I am a victim of, like myself. So waiting until I have the perfect portfolio, or waiting until I get enough in-person feedback from an art director that I respect, and then having them tell me like, yeah, you're ready. And then like, okay, well, that's still not good enough. Wait till if I just land a couple like illustration awards, then I know that like that person wasn't just telling me that in person, like because they felt bad for me. Like then I'll know and then even still, that's not enough. Like, it's just like, all right, well, you just have to recognize like there's something not broken, but like a little, like you need to trick yourself a little bit. And it only hurts from like here to here. And then after that, the pain is over. You just need to like click send. or upload or share or whatever it is. Like, we are creators. Like, we can't just create in a vacuum for ourselves. Like, we have to share what we do. That is part of the process, and it's such an important part of the process. And I mean, we can get into a conversation about how social media may or may not have warped our perception of why we do these things, but other people seeing your work, or not even other people, the intended audience for your work needs to see your work. If I don't care if you're creating a drawing of your niece for their birthday, like, that is the intended audience, and that artwork isn't complete and hasn't fulfilled its duty until that person sees it. And we all create work for either ourselves or an audience. I think sketchbook work can be done for yourself and you're getting that immediate feedback, and or maybe it's just it serves a utilitarian purpose of like, I'm just studying anatomy or that sort of thing. But most of the time you're going to be making work so that other people can see it, and you can't be afraid to let that artwork fulfill its purpose.
Yeah. Well, I guess like anything, you have to practice getting okay with other people seeing your work. But the perfection thing is such a... It stops people... It stops people making progress. You know, if you wait until you're perfect, it's never going to happen. Because, for one thing, perfect is impossible, because the better you get with your skills, the higher your standards will be. So you'll always be chasing something that's a bit out of your comfort zone and a bit higher and higher quality. That's a good thing, I think. If you reached a point where you thought, okay, I'm perfect now, well, what's next?
Yeah, then you stop growing.
Yeah, just downhill from there.
Yeah, there's perfectionism is something that I've suffered with for a while. And I mean, I wouldn't even give to the point where I wouldn't even allow myself to even be called perfectionist, because it had the word perfect in it, and therefore I couldn't be perfect, because that wasn't even a good enough ailment. You know what I mean? But once I recognized what it was, you don't give yourself wiggle room. Like, if you're always shooting for that masterpiece, if you're always shooting for perfect, then you don't give yourself the grace of improving, but not fulfilling that goal, right? So perfectionism, it just, there's with any piece of artwork or any creation that you make, there's going to be a bare minimum, and then there's going to be knocking it out of the park. But when you're shooting for perfection, that window that you have to strike, that target that you have to strike is so tiny that anything short of a bullseye is objectively failure. Yeah. And that sounds ridiculous, because it is. So you need to give yourself a wider window. And if you do need a little bit of a push to grow, then set yourself a very specific goal for that piece of artwork. With this piece, I want to refine the way that I render hair or something like that. Or I want to work on my color or shadows or that sort of thing. And then everything else is allowed to fall within the, quite frankly, good enough a ballpark, and that'll keep you excited to create work. That'll have you making more work, and the more work you get, the more work you make, the better you're going to be. Yeah. It's the fastest way to do it.
Yeah, the good enough thing is a really good point. I've said this before recently, or at least I've written it, but an illustrator's portfolio the goal isn't to be perfect, but the goal is to get clients to hire you. So it only needs to reach that level. It doesn't need to be perfect. Only needs to be good enough to get clients interested. And this actually,
Absolutely.
yeah, this actually leads me on to something else I wanted to talk about, which is self-reflection. You mentioned there having a goal for each image you might produce of rendering the hair or lighting or shadows or whatever it may be. But in order to do that, you need to be able to kind of see your own work. I was going to say objectively, but I don't think you can see it objectively, but more objectively. So you need to be able to recognize what you need to improve. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple ways to do it. And I think the way that artists do it, or like illustrators do it, like kind of intuitively, is being inspired by another artist's piece of work and being like, oh, I'm not here, this person is there. How do I get from here to there? I can see the difference between this and that. So I think that's the easiest, quickest way of being able to like see the difference between your skill set or where you are versus where you want to be. And then there's just going to be things that you're completely blind to. Like, it's like the smell of your own house. You will never know it. Like, you just need someone else to be like, like, I think there's something underneath your refrigerator that you need to address. And I do that in a couple ways. I have a group of artists who I trust, whom I show virtually every piece of artwork to. And then there's like the occasional mentor situation where it might be an art director, it might be like someone who's working in the industry for decades, and you can either reach out to them or take a look for portfolio review opportunities. And those are the times where you're going to get sometimes some serious like career changing feedback, where like it can like in a matter of minutes completely change the direction of your work forever. And it also doesn't even have to be feedback. Like, some of the most life-changing situations I've been in that situation and have just watching other artists work in person. It humanizes them. You see like, oh, the only thing that they're doing differently than me is they lived a little bit longer. You know what I mean? Like, they're just, we're making, our brains are working the same way. They're not a magic person. Like, they just have more experience. So I just need to just keep going. Like, that's encouraging. Oh, wow. Like, or like, oh, that's a much more efficient way of working. Let me try doing that. Or I never thought about like starting a piece like this. I should just do that. That's like, it's like stumbling on the best like life hack you've ever like stumbled upon. And that just comes from just seeing like a peek behind the curtain. But talking to other artists, having other artists in your life, and reaching out to artists that are much, much, much better than you is a big deal.
Yeah. Having a little close community of trusted advisors is always useful, definitely. I just want to rewind a second to what you were saying about comparing your work as a new artist with somebody you admire. There's a danger there, though, isn't there, that you'd be left feeling inadequate. So how do you suggest you take the useful parts and don't let it make you feel like you're not good enough?
All right. So the answer to this question for me changes like quite a bit, like depending on the season. Like, so right now I'm in a mindset of, I think it's okay to feel a little inadequate sometimes. I think it's okay to have that little bit of a pit in your stomach of like, because it can be a motivation to push yourself a little bit harder. And I think that's a good thing. Comparing yourself to someone who is wildly different than who you are and does something wildly different than you are and has just been on this planet much longer than you are is comparing it, or beating yourself up for not being that person. I think that's a stage that most artists go through, but if this is the first time you've heard it, just recognize that, listen, everyone goes through that and it's fine, but you got to be realistic. Like, that's just not, like, you're not going to be that person. You're just not. I think it is helpful to compare yourself to people who are almost like apples to apples. Like, all right, this person, like maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's someone that you went to school with. Like maybe it's someone who, like on paper, like, okay, they're like air quotes more successful than I am, or they're further along on their journey than I am. There's always going to be like life situations depending on how you're raised, or your personal life, or what your day job like is like, you know, everything is going to be different, right? But it's in those situations where you can be like, okay, what are they doing differently that I'm not doing? Because, and you're asking that question because they're where you want to be. Like, they're sitting in the restaurant that you would like to be sitting in, and you're outside in the rain and you would just like to get inside. Like, it's perfectly okay to ask yourself, like, or even that person, like, don't be afraid to ask them, like what am I doing different? What's the difference here? You know, we started this talking about knowledge and sharing knowledge, and living in your head and having it stew and like eat you up is not cool. But having it be the catalyst for discussion, or having it be the catalyst for creation, I think it's something that we do all the time. We probably don't notice it because we're probably doing it in some like kind of healthy way, or it doesn't bother you. Like, if you see a bunch of people walking around a puddle, like, you're probably going to do the same thing too. You're not even thinking about comparing yourself to them. You're just taking information and doing it. But there's something emotional tied to art where you're like comparing your value to their value, and it's just not true. But I think it's a good catalyst. I think it's okay to feel a little bit of burn, a little tingle.
Yeah. There's a difference. There's a difference between, you know, being inspired by somebody that you admire, that you would like to be more like, creatively speaking, and, you know, spending a couple of hours scrolling through Instagram and looking at artists you admire, and then turning to your computer and thinking, what am I going to do now? Where do I start? I think there's got to be an element of kind of analysis, rather than just looking and letting it soak in. There's got to be an element of analyzing an artist's work for specific features, right? So you can start to break down the steps of what you might need to do to get there.
Yeah, it's a useful and an objective process. Like I tend to do it like at the start of a piece or start of an illustration. Like I usually, when I begin, I'm about to start a piece, I create a mood board, I gather reference, and there will be other artists that I look up to in that mood board. I have a folder on my computer that's just called Make This Now. And it's just like, at some point you've got to use this composition, or at some point you just have to like make something that feels like this. It just looks like this color palette, like, and it's just a personal thing. But going back to like the Instagram thing and the scrolling thing, and I think this is where it probably gets a little like yucky, is when you're looking at someone's like count, or you're looking at how many people they're following, and if that's the reason why you're feeling yucky, then stop. Like, just stop. Because like, if we can talk a little bit about likes and follows and views and all that stuff, like,
Please.
if you want to get a lot of likes, if you would like to get a lot of followers, you can do that. It is well within your reach. You just have to make that your focus, and that has to be what you want to do. Like, there's a million different YouTube videos that will show you how to do it. And if that is something that you're passionate about, for whatever reason, you can do it. If you're expecting to just post whatever it is that you feel like posting, whenever you feel like posting it, the way that you feel like posting it, and expect to have like a gajillion followers and likes and that sort of thing, that's not going to work. Nothing works like that. Like, most things have a reason, like a cause and effect. And if you're just hoping for luck and goodwill, then that's not going to work. And I know you might look at someone else's artwork and think to yourself, or it might feel like that's what that person did to get to where they are, but it's not. There's a possibility that a artist that you admire that has a massive view count or a massive follower count or a bunch of likes, it might seem like all they did was just post whatever it is that they liked and it blew up, and maybe that's what happened, but that just means that they happen to have a style and a subject matter that resonates naturally with the ability to stop someone from moving their thumb up and down and then move their thumb up in and out really quickly. Like that is what that is signaling to you. Like that's all that is. Yeah. I mean, I don't need to tell you, if you've never heard this before, there are a gajillion artists that are super good that don't have a bunch of likes because they just aren't like following the rules of getting a bunch of likes, and it's really not that important.
That's true. And followers and likes don't necessarily mean you've got a good career either. No. If you're spending a lot of time focusing on chasing those followers and likes, you could probably afford to spend a bit more time on your actual craft. But I think there's also, for specifically for new artists, trying to get a bigger following, it's really hard because you're not at a level yet that a lot of people want to follow you. Whereas I think if the focus at first was on becoming the kind of artist that people want to follow, then the followers would just be a kind of a natural byproduct. The better you get at your particular illustration style, and the more interesting clients and interesting projects you work on, the followers will come. It's a lot easier to get followers once you're working for big name clients and you're working on cool projects. But if you're a beginner, just trying to get your first clients, there's not that much to follow.
Even then, it really makes it matters. Like, right. So like, I've had a couple of like conversations with illustrators about art competitions, right? And one of the things that happens is that a certain kind of piece of art will resonate with someone that is more likely to resonate with like a judge or someone that is looking at something really quickly. Like in isolation, the piece of artwork that you created, in the context of which it was created, might be flawless, perfect, and just beautiful. But in the medium of showing artwork to someone very quickly, and they have to make a snap analysis based off of the other artwork that they surrounded with at whatever time of day after they've been doing this for however hours, is very different. And your brain is doing the exact same thing when you're scrolling through whatever feed you're thinking of. Like there's a a phrase in marketing called scroll stopping, right? Like, get something that's scroll stopping. Like, that is the act of doing something that is counterintuitive than what the person is expecting, so that they ask themselves a question like, wait, what just happened? And then, you know, you go forth. Do you want to base your artwork off of that? Maybe. Maybe. Or you could just make the artwork that you want to make for the purpose that it's supposed to have. And then if you do want to present it in the medium of social media in a way that's engaging, you can treat that as a separate project. Like, it's its own thing. Like, my artwork, I would just post it and it would get however many likes or followers that it got. Like, I didn't care too much about it, because it was just kind of like, I was much more concerned about like making the artwork. But once I started making reels, which is a completely different format, which is a format that is the sign of our times, and a format that works well with like my abilities, or what some of the talents that I have, like, then things blew up. Like, that was it. Like, it wasn't like my art got suddenly magically better. Like, I just presented it differently. Like, that's it. Like, so, and I can tell you, those followers don't come with buckets of cash. Like, you know, they're not handing out tokens that are like, here, this is going to change your life. Yeah. Like, it does open up different opportunities to talk to people that you may not have spoken to before, and you might get the attention of people that you haven't talked to before, if that's something that you're interested in. But other than that, it's, you know, meh.
Yeah, it's people are judged. Well, you know, illustrators are judged by clients on their following. Sometimes I see this, you know, sometimes I'll be asked what an artist's following is, and you think, well, do you like the work or don't you like the work?
Yeah, that's whack. That's so silly to me. Like that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And it seems kind of yucky and not something that I would concern myself with at all.
No.
Like, I mean, unless you have some kind of very specific social media campaign that you're trying to like partner with that artist for, then that makes sense. But otherwise, like, I mean, who cares? Like, if the work is stunning, if the work is ticking the box, then what difference does it make?
Yeah, exactly. Shouldn't matter. I mean, you could get, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I'm sure I could think of a super famous artist that isn't even on Instagram, you know? And then,
oh yeah,
are they not getting work because they're not on Instagram?
Yeah, I saw one the other day for tour.com, the book cover. Like, they were just posted multiple times, and I was like, oh my goodness, please, like, I just want this person to be on Instagram because I want more of their work. It's so beautiful. And for whatever reason, they elected to not be on social media. Or some of the artists that I follow, they post so infrequently they might as well not be on social media. Like, whatever.
True. How do you practice your creative work? I mean, I guess at this point you've had a lot of practice, but now you're going into illustration with more focus. How are you developing those skills?
Pretty problem oriented. That's how I've practiced my art, I think, always, right? So when I wanted to be an animator, like figure drawing and gesture drawing was like king. So that was like what I really focused on. And then when I was an oil painter, just being able to handle the medium, like having like control of the paint, like being able to create a painting that didn't look like it had any brush strokes, you know, just like looked like I was like looking at like Bouguereau and like, you know, there's super refined old masters, and like trying to emulate that kind of work. So it was always like, I see this person's work or this kind of work, I want to create that. And right now for me, it's, I guess, refining my rendering. Recently had a conversation where I came to the realization, like, I can tighten things up a bit. I'm a realist painter that needs to just kind of lean into that and just like accept the fact that, listen, your work looks realistic. Don't be afraid to wear that hat. And just knowing that was, just hearing that out loud and just knowing it, like, kind of gave me permission to be like, okay, well, this is what I need to focus on. Incorporating environments, like having like a foreground, middle ground, background, that sort of thing. These are things that I'm like taking into mind. So how I practice it is just, you know, I know that this is a problem that I need to work on. The next time I create a piece of artwork, this is what I'm going to deliberately put into it. But that's where I'm at this stage of my like ability.
Yeah.
If 2 years ago, it would have just been like, just drawing the figure a lot, like literally thousands of times, until I was able to just draw it without using any reference and just being able to put the figure in whatever position that I wanted. And then like mission accomplished.
Figure drawing is definitely a good place to start.
Yeah. If you want to be a figurative artist, yeah, you don't have to be. Yeah.
Cool. We got a few other things that we were going to talk about here, and one which we kind of circled around earlier, but rejection, fear of rejection, whether that be by peers, more likely clients, I suppose. How do you deal with it?
Oh, I'm still dealing with it. It is the number one fear that I have. Like, I have an Excel sheet chock full of art directors that I have not sent an email to. Like, it's sad. So how do you do it? You just got to do it. And I'm going to send an email right when I get off of this call. That's like my own like accountability. And just recognizing, like, that's your bag. Like, that's your problem. Like, just like, I don't know, treat it like you have, like, you have too much sugar after midnight or something like that. Like, you know, just like, listen, it's okay. This is something I struggle with. Like, it's not a reflection of you as a person or your abilities. Know that it's not real. I think that's the biggest thing. You're not alone. That fear is not real. Fear is probably the most worthless and common emotion among artists. I don't know one time fear makes you a better artist. Like, I just don't understand. I mean, I know it's based off of our hardwiring, but like, if you could just like, the second, this is going to get like a little like metaphysical or whatever, but the second you feel that emotion, like fear, all emotions manifest themselves in some kind of physiological like aspect, like immediately. It could be like anger might be like you feel your flesh getting a little warmer, or a little tingle at the back of your neck, or like a pit at your stomach. And then part of this like comes from like mindfulness and meditation and that sort of thing, but whatever. The second you feel that feeling, for me, it usually is like I can feel like right here, like like in the middle of my chest, maybe at the bottom of my stomach. And the second you start to feel that emotion, just be like, I know what that is. This isn't real. This isn't, that's just a thing. Like, that's not, stop. Like, you're not going to win here. And then once you can separate yourself from that, like, involuntary emotional response. You can't control whether that feeling is going to show up. That's a part of your brain that you don't have control over, but you can control how, like, what you choose to do with it. And it's not like, oh, I've handed down this wisdom, therefore you must do it right, or that is it. Like, no, you're always going to struggle with this. I'm going to struggle with this. Yeah. I'm struggling with it right now. But just know, like, this is not real. Like, this is not a real thing. Like, you can just send that information, like send that email, or like reach out to that person, or sit down and draw that thing that you don't think that you are good enough to draw. Just do it. Just get over that. Just tell that little feeling like you're not real. Or even if you don't feel like you can control it, just kind of stare at it, just like live in it for a minute. Just like, all right, this feeling is happening right now. And we all know that all emotions are temporary. They are like the wind. Like, they're like the weather. Like, right now it might feel like it's raining super hard and that it will never stop raining, but just write it out. That rain will go away. And if you stay within that mindset of like, I still want to do this thing, that feeling is gone. Now you can do it, and you won't have the same kinds of barriers in your way.
Some people seem to have this built-in ability to use fear to guide them. You know, they use fear as a compass. Whatever they're scared of doing, they go do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't come naturally to me, I've got to say.
No. No, because you're normal. You're a normal person. Like a fear is designed so that we don't do that. Like, that is what it's for. But I don't know why it shows up in art. Like, yeah. It's like did someone long ago pick up a paintbrush and get struck by lightning? I don't know why it happened. Like, we don't need it.
Yeah, it serves an important purpose in certain aspects of our life, but sending an email to an art director should not be one of those situations.
No, right? No, absolutely not. Like, even if you've like, I think every illustrator that starts off has like bungled some kind of like art director interaction or whatever. Oh, yeah. And it will not destroy your career. Like, if anything, you've joined an elite club of artists that have bungled like interactions with art directors. Welcome. You're now one of us. Like, you can like pull up a pint at the pub and we can all talk about it. Like, it's just like, it happens, but it's not the end of the world, and you need to learn from that situation. Not learning from those situations is where the problems come. But getting yourself into those situations so that you can learn makes all the difference in the world. Like, there are times where I'm kind of grateful that I didn't have opportunities or didn't dive into certain opportunities because I was just too green. Like, I was just too junior. Mm-hmm. But like, because I had still tried to some degree, like, or for example, it would be like an interview or a first interaction, and it was just a disaster, but it may not have felt like a disaster. It just didn't go well. And it wasn't until years later, in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, I totally botched that. Like, who knew? Like, you move on. Or you botch it and you realize like, oh, that's what I'm not going to do next time. Or, oh, I didn't realize like that I was even supposed to be doing that sort of thing. Like, how else are you going to learn? Especially if you're a self-taught artist. Like, if you're a self-taught artist, it's awesome that you have the opportunity to do that, and the resources to teach yourself, but there are just things that you don't know that you don't know. And not letting fear inhibit you, and not being afraid to have conversations, not being afraid to interact with other people. Sorry, I thought my cat was knocking at the door. And then it's going to make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. I'm haunted by a few things that I've done in the past, right? That I know when I think about it logically, nobody else remembers that. Nobody else remembers
No.
them. I'm thinking specifically about a time I listened to this radio show, a couple of guys that I like. I emailed in one week, and it just so happened that week it was a different host, and this host read out my email and just was really savage. And it was so embarrassing. But nobody listening to the radio show knew that it was me emailing in. That guy won't remember.
No.
But I think about it all the time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Awful.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But it's okay. It's okay. It makes for a cool story. Like, having gone through that makes you a stronger person.
Yeah, I haven't emailed the radio show since, though. You think maybe I need to break the curse and
right now, like, now you have a good excuse, like, right? So it's like, it goes back to what I was saying, like, goals. Like, now you've got a goal. Like, the goal is just like, I don't want this feeling to like get in my way. Like, not like you want to be like a email correspondent, like, but like, get over that little hump.
Yeah. When a new artist emails an art director and they don't get a reply, it's so easy to assume that the art director just hates your work. But the truth is, well, you know what? Hating your work is a possibility, but it's only just such a tiny possibility.
Right.
The truth is, they're probably just too busy. Didn't really look at it.
Yeah.
They're on holiday. They're out sick. And even, I see a lot of emails from new artists. The ones I like, I don't necessarily reply to. I'll just put them in a folder of art, good styles, and just kind of save them for later, but not reply. And I suspect that's the same for art directors. If you're busy, you don't necessarily have the time to do that. So it's just about persisting and assuming the best.
Yeah, like I have so many great thoughts. Well, I don't know if they're great thoughts, but I have thoughts about this.
Yeah.
One of the most eye-opening like bits of information that I received about this specific topic was how many emails a day an art director gets, and especially like if it's an art director for like a bigger company that you're super stoked about. We're talking hundreds, like the kind of numbers that would make a normal person's inbox like not usable. Like that. So first of all, just know that that's what you're up against. So, and then, if you're a new artist, or if you're an artist that is introducing yourself to an art director, stop thinking about yourself as an artist and think of yourself as a couch dealer, like someone that sells couches. Now, this person is just sitting in their chair and they get a blind email from this couch company, and what you're hoping for, realistically, as a couch company, is that they open that email and think, whoa, this person makes some pretty cool couches. Like, now they don't know anything about this company. They don't know how reliable. They don't know any of their reviews. They don't know if any of these couches like last more than 15 minutes. Like, you get them home and they could fall apart. But their first instinct is, wow, these are pretty cool couches, right? Now, if you got this email and from someone like this couch company, like, you might have those same feelings that I just described, but you would also be like, all right, well, let's see what else they got. And then 3 or 4 months later, you get another email and they send you another set of couches that look like they're made by the same company, they don't have to look better than the previous couches. They just need to be a new season. Like, I've already established that I like them. They don't need to like be like 13 times better than the previous couches. They just need to be a new model. Like, that's it, right? and some kind of consistency. Like, this looks like it came from the same company. And then that person that receives that email is like, oh, okay, so this is a company that's still in business. Like, maybe they have some reviews or the equivalent of like other gigs. Like, if we're like marrying the metaphor of an illustrator and a couch company. And that builds up a little bit of trust. And as a person like that is receiving this, you sent me another email. You care about me to some degree. You care that like this wasn't just like one random like mass email that you sent out to a jillion people. No, you do want to work with me. All right, this is personal. Okay, cool. And then what you're really, really doing is waiting for that person to need a couch. Like, they are not always going to need a couch, and they're not always going to need that specific kind of couch. So you just need to continue to remind them that you sell couches, that you're a reliable company, and you're going to be a great fit. And then once you tick that box, then it's on.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's a really, really great way to think about it. I also like the seasonal element to it, because I guess a lot of illustrators will be emailing art directors. Maybe they do it 3 or 4 times a year. It's a nice way to think about it in seasonal terms. It doesn't have to be drastically improved. It just has to be a different set of work. Makes perfect sense.
You just need that consistency. It's the same thing you would expect out of pick your favorite fashion line, pick your favorite company, whatever it is. Like, they don't need to blow you out of the water. You've already fallen in love with them. You just want more. Like when I emailed you, like with the start of my portfolio, I'll explain this for the audience a little bit. I watched your videos. The way that my portfolio was working prior to watching your videos were just like, this is just a collection of stuff that I've done over my life, which is what I see a lot of artists do that aren't quite established. It's just like, this is just like the bargain bin. Like, it's just miscellaneous. But the first thing you do is ask yourself, like, all right, let's get rid of that little fear voice and pretend that fear voice doesn't exist. And what kind of work would you make if this is like the only work that you were going to make and you could get paid for it? Like, people say this all the time. Like, what would you be doing for a living if you never had to worry about failing? Like, you kind of need to do the same thing, right? So that narrowed my portfolio down to like 3 pieces, and that was scary. Like, that was a live portfolio. Like, if you went to thewhiteleaf.com, then you would only see 3 paintings there. And it was like, one thing that motivates you to kind of get to work. Like, and then the other thing is like, man, these 3 pieces are me. Like, this is cool. Like, this kind of feels cool. Like, you can kind of like, it's almost like back in the music days, this isn't an album, but this is like a cool EP, or this is just a single, but I like it. Like, I like this band, right? And I just sent it to you just based off of like some of the feedback or the information that you're presenting, like, hey, try creating something that looks like this, or like narrow down your work to the stuff that you want to do. And the best feedback that I got from you was like, this is good, I just want more of it. And I was like, I can do that. Like, that I can do. Like, once I know that I'm in the right lane, then I can continue to do it. And you'll probably be in the right lane when you get rid of separate the wheat from the chaff, when you get rid of the riffraff and just narrow down the thing that you love doing.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't say that often, actually, but
cool.
What I've been thinking, I get asked a lot, how many images should I put in my portfolio? And there's no right answer there, because I'd rather see a portfolio with 3 great images in it than 50 irrelevant images, you know. And often when when a new artist has just come straight out of college, they've got all this experimentation, and they want to show it all because they don't necessarily know which parts are going to lead where. So you think, well, I'll just show it all. And it makes sense, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it does paint a picture of a student portfolio.
Yeah.
How do you suggest a new artist refines that? Chooses which direction to choose. Sort of just weird phrasing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I love this question because it's something that I've kind of come to the realization rather recently. And it kind of piggybacks off of like the last thing we talked about, or that I talked about, was going from zero to a portfolio is much easier than you think if you know what direction you're heading in. It's hard when you're trying to stumble upon it, It's the exact same thing with like likes and follows on Instagram. If you're just trying to stumble upon greatness, you're going to struggle. You can do a little bit of that. You can do a little bit of experimenting in the beginning, and experimentation is crucial for artists to grow and to learn. But an idea that I've been kind of trying to craft lately is like, you have to have home. You have to have your home, like your home base. It could be portraits. It could be map design. It could be editorial spot illustration. That is your home. It is probably the thing that you're the most excited about, and that you can execute with your eyes closed. Like if the aliens come down and they're like, listen, if you don't deliver some piece of artwork that's impressive right now, we're going to destroy the planet. Like whatever it is that you're about to make is probably it, right? Okay. That's like your home. And then you just walk a little bit down the road. And you don't necessarily know which way you're going to go, but as long as it's kind of close to home, then you're probably going to be doing fine. And if you get too far off the beaten path, then you can just kind of go back home and then kind of build from there. But you keep making new pieces because you know what will work, right? Once you have those one or two pieces that you know will work, it's really easy to expound upon them. So if you're a young artist and your portfolio is kind of helter-skelter, like I would literally pick 2, maybe 3 pieces that you absolutely love, and that they have to feel like they're unified. They have to look like they live in the same universe. And if that's not the case, then you just have one piece that is your darling, that is your home. And you make it your mission to make more pieces that feel and look like that. And if you've chosen the right piece, that will not be difficult to do. If you're just doing something that you think is going to sell, or you feel like you have to do, then it's going to be grueling and you're not going to be motivated to make it. And then it just becomes work. And I mean, that's possible, but that's not why I got into this.
Yeah. I think there's also maybe an argument for just picking something and starting. If you've got work in 6 or 7 different styles, pick 1, pick 2, and just make some more work and see what happens. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You discover you don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Don't do it again. And it's also, once you've built up a bit of momentum.
That's Siri.
If you can pick up some momentum, it doesn't matter which direction it is.
Yeah.
It's just about getting into the habit of practicing and making new things constantly, and then you can move sideways. If you decide one direction isn't working, you're already rolling, so you can move and go do something else.
Yeah. Like learning to finish a piece and finishing a piece in a reasonable schedule is one of the best feelings in the world. Like, so if you're an artist that can't finish work, like finish something, like give yourself a I hate to say give yourself a deadline, because that is such a cliche that I feel like it doesn't even, I feel like people can't even hear it. It's like it's like diet and exercise. Oh, okay. Wah, wah, wah. Like, forget about the deadline. Just be excited about finishing something. Like, make it the goal to try to finish it. And it doesn't have to be finished in a super fast way, but it will happen quickly if your goal is to finish it. If every time you sit down to that piece, you say to yourself, all right, my goal is to finish this thing. My goal is to finish this thing. My goal is to finish this thing. Time will take care of itself, because you start triaging decisions. Like, do I need to do this? Maybe, probably not. Like, let's get it out of the way. And then once it's done and you get into the habit of finishing things, then starting something else becomes a lot easier. And then within your comfort zone and within your style, or within like your home, the things that you like doing, once you've kind of established that, you can try different things that still live within that world, right? So one of the things that I took away from one of your videos was talking about like botanical artwork. And I never in a million years thought I would ever want to paint a flower. Like it was just like, I'm sorry, have we met? Like, why would I want to paint a flower? But I was like, all right, I kind of have this style where like I'm working in this way where it's the subject matter in this like deep chiaroscuro, like against a dark background with dramatic, almost cinematic lighting. Mm-hmm. Like, how is this, like, what if I painted a flower in that environment? And then at the time I was knee deep in like the Witcher series, and I was like, okay, well, one of the main characters is described as smelling like lilac and gooseberries. Oh, there's my flower. Like, now I can paint something that I'm interested in a way that it makes sense. Like, I'm not suddenly becoming like a surface design artist. Like, I don't need to do that. I can just bring it to the narrative world that I want to live in. And from that, I ended up like, I learned a lot, because first of all, lilacs have a lot of petals and it's a pain in the butt to paint. It's a pain, but it got me like pretty fast. So then when I came up with an idea of like painting a peonies, which didn't have nearly as many petals, I was like, this is going to be a breeze. Like, we're not painting hundreds and hundreds of tiny petals. We're talking like, maybe a few dozen. But it wasn't intimidating anymore, and it fit well within my wheelhouse. And that was like one of my most successful, well, here it is. Like, this is one of my most successful pieces. Like, but that would have never happened if I hadn't tried doing something totally different. Yeah. But also doing it in a way that works for me.
I always bang on about artists, trying out different subjects when they're building their portfolio. Mm-hmm. And there's a practical reason to do that, because the more different kinds of subjects you show, the more chance you've got of attracting different kinds of clients. But it's also putting yourself out of your comfort zone. You're not always going to be asked, as a commercial artist, you're not always going to be asked to work on things that you're interested in or know anything about. Mm-hmm. So being able to practice working on things that you wouldn't usually find that interesting is just a challenge, a fun challenge.
Yeah, trying to find that joy and those I guess those guardrails are beneficial, and then bringing it back to you. Like, there's an artist, Tommy Arnold. He wrote this blog piece about like the approach state versus like the resistance state, and he got it from someone else. So sorry, whoever came up with it first. I don't know who your name is, but just trying to take, it's just as simple as like, listen, this feels like a challenge. This is something that I feel uncomfortable about. I just kind of want to not bungle it. Instead of doing that, being like, it's just as simple as being like, oh, this is a new challenge. I'm going to try to knock this out of the park. Like, I'm going to try to make this as fun and as awesome as humanly possible. Just try to harken back to those moments when you were super excited about a piece. Like, what was it about it? Like, what was it about it that those paintings or designs that you began that didn't require any outside motivation? Like, the muse just talked to you and you're ready to go. Try to tap into that feeling. Just like the aforementioned fear of like how it is just this feeling, that is inside you that you don't have like control over, but it doesn't have to rule you. Motivation is the same thing. It can be summoned. You can just summon that physiological feeling of being excited about something. It's similar to anger. It's probably going to be a tingle at the back of your head. It's going to be like a increase in heart rate. Turn on music that excites you. Like, get your brain into the mindset of like, set the stage for being stoked, and then think about, and this is why finishing things, or getting into the habit of finishing things, is so important. Like, think of how you felt the last time you finished something that you were stoked about, and know that you're going to have that feeling again with this piece. It's just a matter of, you're already on the track. It's just a matter of time, like just going through the motions, and you will reach that destination. It makes all the difference in the world. But it's also important to remember that it does not have to be that way. Like, you can just slog through this. You have that choice. So you just make that conscious choice and you can do it, and your work will be better for it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a phrase. Well, do you have I assume you have a specific desk where you do your computer work, and an area where you do your painting work. Mm-hmm. You do anything else in those areas, or are they specifically for when you want to get into creative mode or work mode?
Yeah. So this is my office. I'm fortunate enough where this is a dedicated space for me creating. I have 2 kids, 2 young girls under 7, and my oldest is on the autism spectrum. I have a wife that works from home. I work from home, and we have a new cat. So all of that to say is things get chaotic outside of these 4 walls. And I also operate on a different sleep schedule as the rest of the house. I'm usually up till like 1 o'clock, anywhere sometimes as late as 2:30. And I'll do nothing happens inside this room other than creating, either recording a video or working on an illustration or rigging up something to do one of the 2 things. And then I recently got an iPad and started using Procreate, and that has been tremendous, because when it is kind of late and I'm just hanging out with my wife and the day is over and she's watching something that I am not particularly interested in, but I don't want to leave her side. Huh?
Such as? What did you watch that you're not interested in?
Like right now, Vanderpump Rules is like, like all the rage, I guess. It's like dominating. But like, I like to be next to her because, you know, we've been in our separate corners all day long. So just being in proximity to her. And I don't want to, but also that is kind of my time after work to start working on something, or I might have like the itch to have an idea. Being in that relaxed state on the couch, hanging out with her, and then being able to sketch is just tremendous. So having a dedicated space or dedicated times to create are tremendous. But this is the first time in my life where I've had that. Prior to this, I've almost always painted on like the kitchen table surrounded by everybody, or I had a physical easel set up in the corner of a living room, like with a little box. So I've always just kind of like, and you still treat that little space like it is your creative space, because that is what it is. But if you can separate it, it makes life a little bit easier, but that's not always the case. Like when I was living in Brooklyn and also in parts of Manhattan, like you don't get a lot of real estate. So you just got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. I have different spaces for different activities. I mean, I'm lucky in that way. You know, I've also got this office,
Nice.
but I've got a little more crafty table over there where I do my projects. I do my writing at this desk. I've got a reading chair, but I think that switch in environment really helps to just get into the right frame of mind.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. It triggers I learned mostly about what do you call it? Like bedtime routines, like with the kids, and particularly with my oldest on the spectrum, because they're so sensitive to like repeating like patterns and just like rituals and routines. That a lot of us are. We just are blind to them, or we just take them for granted. But when you're purposeful about a routine, like your mind and your body respond to them. You might be the type of person who like makes tea or coffee in the beginning of the day, and like I'm sure you've had days where maybe you've skipped it and you're still technically fine, like you didn't go into like cardiac arrest or anything like that, but the day is a little bit better when you just go through those motions, or when you start the day off listening to your favorite like news or podcast or whatever it is. Like you're teeing up your brain for what is about to happen. And the same thing happens with art, like especially if you're like the type of person that moonlights. Like if you have like a day job, maybe you work retail and you're on your feet all day long, or you're working customer service and you've just had like an onslaught of just negative energy all day long, it can be really difficult. Or maybe even worse, if you are in a creative job all day long and then you have to come home and try to do a different kind of creativity. Or if you work remotely and you have a creative job, like separating your rectangles, like this rectangle is for work and this rectangle is for pleasure, like makes a big difference. Like there are certain apps that I will not even put on my iPad because I don't even want to see them. They will never live on this phone, on this device, because this is a safe space, for creativity.
Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, this has been a great chat. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time.
No, I mean, this has been super fun. You can follow me on the gram, thewhiteleaf.com, or the White Leaf.
The White Leaf. Great. Cool. Well, thanks a lot. It's been great to talk to you, and we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, cheers.